So very welcome to this pre-COP26 event. So we have a global audience today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Climate change is a huge challenge for all. And in just a few days, there will be many policymakers joining Glasgow for this very important meeting where climate action is going to accelerate. So we, as an investor and a shareholder at this capital group in many companies around the world across sectors, we think it's really important to try to understand what is going to happen, what the implications are for the markets and for the companies we're investing in. And specifically, really important to understand where China and the US are standing in terms of climate action. Why these two countries? Well, obviously, these are the two largest emitting countries on the planet. And this is, of course, extremely important to understand the implications that their, I would say, approach to COP26 and what we can expect from them will be. So for today, I'm really delighted to welcome two people I've had the chance to work with across alongside several years, who I believe are the perfect people, the perfect experts to share with us perspectives on China and the US on what's going to happen at COP26. I'm not going to tell you exactly what they've been doing all their life because they have a very long bio, and the bio is included in the invitation. Just trust me that these are the people that know what might be happening, and I'm really excited to have them here. So welcome, Cary from the US, Changhua from China. I myself, based in Hong Kong, I'm Karine Hirn, Chief Sustainability Officer of this capital group. And once again, very happy to have you here. So I will start straight away asking you, because COP26 is coming very, very soon. What do you think are the stumbling blocks that could spell success or disaster in Glasgow? Who wants to start?
I don't mind to start at all. Cary?
Please go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karine, and thank you, everyone. I'm delighted to be, with this program on this actually with Cary as well. And I also look forward actually to learning more from Cary, to hear more about the US perspective there as well. To answer Karine's question, and I think when we talk about the success or failures, we have to make sure what the benchmark, what the bars we've set or expectations we've set. If you look at the COP26, there are four major objectives the UK government or presidency of COP26 has already set up there. Of course, one, to make sure, by 2050, the carbon neutrality goal or commitment will be delivered. Second, the focus is around, adaptation, supporting the most vulnerable local communities, and also, of course, natural habitats, adapt to climate change. And the third one is mobilizing capital, financial capital. And the last one, of course, it's about a lot of details and modalities of implementations in the Paris Agreement, make sure negotiation will succeed. So if we look at the three bars, actually, then we can think about whether we're going to talk about whether we're going to succeed or fail. I think we are definitely entering COP26 in a sort of failing mood to a large extent, because if you look at this, mid-century targets, we know we're not sure. I don't think COP26 will be able to give us the clarity of the answer or the granularity of the answer that's needed to make sure the 1.5 degrees or carbon neutrality by mid-century will be delivered, because we are at a very difficult point of time. From adaptation perspective, it's very complicated. I'm delighted to see actually the natural habitat, the nature part, actually biodiversity part, is now very clearly included in the climate negotiations there. But if you look at the Kunming Declaration, look at the process of the COP15 of Biodiversity Convention there, it's proven very difficult because there are a lot of details, actually, different interests, different levels, different aspirations, different needs, whatever. We haven't been able to really come together to find the solutions there. Financially, this $100 billion sort of annual commitment, and still it has not been delivered fully yet. We're getting closer. But to what extent, first, of course, that's going to be delivered, reaching to the $100 billion bar. And more important, we need more because climate change is happening more intensively. We need to develop countries to chip in more money, actually, to support developing countries. But now we are in the sort of still, caught up in the COVID pandemic, sort of, getting into the sort of post-COVID, this recovery period of time. And globally, look around, no country is really winning, right? We are in this deep economic recession. It's getting worse. So to what extent industrialized countries will be willing or able to chip in more money to increase actually the level of financial support? We don't know yet. Of course, I think probably the most optimistic part could be potentially on the last point. It's more like the details, right? Some details in the Paris Agreement, technically, around the carbon market, around a disclosure, we call like MRV, stuff like that. So that's where I think probably I would have most hope of in terms of some sort of substance coming out of the COP26 there. So in a nutshell, again, I don't think we're going to fail totally. I think, if you look at the global process, UK presidency and, US and China, we all been sort of toning very positively, very cooperatively to make sure the COP26 wouldn't really tumble. But then if you look at the details, actually, expectations of the success, we are not there yet. From that perspective, I'm very pessimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get in more details into all of these very important elements. Cary.
Yes, thank you for that fascinating. And sadly, I share that perspective. I like to be a foolish optimist, but the foolishness and the optimism seem to be fading away. But one of the things that has been a main focus of myself for the last few years is trying to help create a situation where the US and China can cooperate together and collaborate. Because I think nothing's more important than the potential power of the US and China to work together to solve the world's problems. It's why we hosted an event in China. An East Capital gave us a hand, which we really appreciate, and spoke at the event in Shenzhen. And a lot has changed since then. At the time, we were wondering whether the U.S. led trade war, where would that go? And so much has happened, including the pandemic and the Biden administration coming in. And we're still in this sort of period of time where we're not fully cooperating. My sense is that that's getting slightly better, but we need overall cooperation around the world. This sort of tension that exists, just as far as I'm concerned, totally unnecessary, because the climate crisis is seriously urgent. It's much more urgent than the targets that are being set. We're failing to meet what we need to do, and we can only achieve that if we cooperate more. My way of thinking, there are 5 things that we need to do. We need to get companies to do everything they can to transform for the modern era, and the work of East Capital and engaging with companies is quite useful in that regard. We need investors to do more. We're dramatically under investing in what we need to do. Policymakers, they need to provide the supportive policy that we might otherwise just get on with and do anyway. We need the average person to be on board, because here in the US, we're not progressing on the sort of transformation that we need to do on infrastructure. That would happen if we had more people on board, the average person understanding the urgency of climate change. And for some reason, we failed to achieve getting just that common understanding amongst the people whom the politicians listen to when they decide what to support. And lastly, innovation. And that perhaps is where the US is leading, along with China. We're making decent progress on innovation, things like Climate Tech VC, where we helped start a very popular newsletter last year. But we need to do a lot more. Investors need to do more. Companies need to do more. Policymakers need to do more, but they can only do more if we cooperate and collaborate. And we're not having global conversations about a price on carbon or a mechanism that gives people money back so that we don't have protests in the streets of Paris. So we have a lot more to be doing, and I'm not frankly even sure the COP framework is the right way to solve this.
True. But so Karine and Changhua, you've already mentioned a couple of times that we are in a very specific time due to the pandemic, due to the fact that the world has somewhat, of course, been focusing on COVID-19 and all the implication it's had as well on the economies. So do you think that actually this is going to have an impact on COP26 in terms of, again, the ability of calling it a success or a failure? Does it really matter?
Yeah, I think at different levels there. In terms of really make sure, from health protection perspective, we've already had a lot of experience. If you look at the Tokyo Olympics, if you look at Kunming COP, of course, it's divided into two. So physically, actually, on the spot, the number compared to COP26 would be limited. But technically, I think we do have adequate tools, instruments, and awareness capability to make sure there's a sort of physical presence of, more than 20,000 people will be around, or 30, whatever the number there. So when people gathered in Glasgow COP26, at least from the health perspective, I think we are better prepared now with the vaccine, particularly in developed countries. Of course, that remains a challenge for many developing countries because they still do not have adequate vaccination capability there. So that could be. But when you physically got there, I think, wearing masks, social distance, whatever. So I do not see a major challenge from the health, the pandemic perspective. And then I think if you look at the pandemic's impact on social economic side, I think that's exactly where we are, right? We are stuck in that. COVID-19 has taught us many, many things, right? It gives us the time to sit back and really understand what is happening. We started to see all this sort of moving blocks. Probably we didn't really have much time to look into before pandemic. And also actually to start to understand the connectivity actually of all those moving blocks. So understand the particular from the problems or challenge or crisis perspective. I think we know more. Even science actually is moving forward so fast into help and understanding the causes, and even if you look at the climate change issues there, I was following this Nobel Prize on the physics side, right? And it's fascinating to see climate modeling. Not only tell us, the temperature rise, but also really tell us more and more clearly why, right? Why what are sort of causing this sort of rises there? So that's fascinating to see. From the social economic side, particularly related to what we're talking about here, the climate change issues there, we are surprised in many, many ways. I think, of course, positively, if you look at this lockdown, right, when, because we all know why climate change is changing, because of human activities, right? So when there's a human activity somehow is forced to stop, well, nature is coming back, right? You started to see more blue skies, better environments, even wildlife is actually enjoying more freedom, stuff like that. Fascinating on the environmental side. But then, of course, we're people. We need to eat. We need shelter, water. We have all those needs that essential services even that need to be met, satisfied. Then suddenly we feel like supply chain, right, and it's disrupted. So the energy shock, right? We call it energy crunch. So you start to see all those sort of challenges probably were not there before. Now we are stuck in that sort of situation. So if you particularly look at China, and this, we very quickly we are looking into trying to address this particular, we call it energy crunch or shortage of power. Now coal use is coming back, because if you look at the government policy in terms of really, control coal use, reduce coal use, and also addressing carbon issues there. China has been making huge progress. Fascinating, right? We've been shutting down coal mines. We're trying, beside technology part, we're trying to reduce actually reliance on coal. And then, of course, investment in coal definitely has been dramatically, reduced. Now we're in the situation of sudden surge of energy need, electricity needs, because China is the first one recovering, right? And so China has to manufacture more goods actually to supply, the needs of the rest of the world there, and the energy becomes a challenge. And then in that context there's a geopolitical element there, right? Because China, Australia somehow got into this weird dynamics there. We decided, so we're not going to import your coal anymore, right? And so you start to see all those sort of moving blocks coming together for all kinds of reasons there. So yes, on one side, we do need to address the carbon issue. China is the largest emitter. But in reality, somehow we've been addressing certain points at some certain blocks, in that context, but somehow they're connected with all the other stuff. You started to see pricing, China's power market, reform, this weird pricing mechanisms there, right? We need to take into consideration of, people's well-being, whatever, right? The price of electricity has been intentionally kept very low. Then suddenly, when the coal prices rises because of scarcity, and so Chinese power plants basically still heavily, mostly nearly half of the electricity coming from coal, and so yes, the more electricity a power plant generated to generate, actually the more money it will lose. It doesn't have incentives for power plants actually to supply more. I think that's a sort of, on one side, of course, it's very bad if you look at the impacts there. On the other side, actually, we really offers, I think decision makers and the society overall, the depth of understanding of the complexity of the issues we're talking about here, really the best. Of course, if you look at the latest decision by the State Council national government, now, of course, we are relaxing the price control now. Power plants, the electricity for commercial industrial use could rise up to 20% rather than be highly controlled. It's sort of relaxing a little bit. On the other side, if you look at the relax on coal, China definitely is using more coal, right? Opening coal mines, which were shut down before. So you started to see, wait a second, we're stuck, right? Yes, we have this carbon issue we had to address, but the people issues there, right? I don't think today, I haven't really seen anywhere around the world, particularly among the major economies today, that have managed or succeeded to really address this well or effectively. Not only necessarily at the country level, partly also because of the connectivity, the global value chain, right? Globally, we're not really there yet. I think that's probably will offer some sort of perspective, will be definitely brought into the COP26 discussion, rather than just talk about carbon, right? Of course, we need to reduce them, but somehow if we do not address more like, I call it root causes, in reality, particular connectivity, among all the moving blocks, we're not going to get too far.
This is very interesting. Thank you. Cary, what would you like to add about that? We'll be talking about the COVID recovery should be a green reset. Is it a green reset? What do you think?
Yeah. Economists have no shame. They're actually particularly terrible at telling us where we're going to go. And I think COVID-19 will perhaps, now that I've thrown economists under a bus, I will make a prediction, which is that COVID-19 is going to be the start of surprises. The climate science tells us that we're already out of time. And so I think COVID-19 will be the first of surprises that will shock the system. Like, which economist told us that China and India were going to run out of coal? Like, this is the age of the economic surprise. And economics writ large, the way it's taught in business schools, the way it's practiced, is of no use whatsoever. And we need to start thinking differently. And some people try to do that, whether it's the Dasgupta review out of the UK government telling us we need to price nature, but of course there's no roadmap telling us how to do that either. So it's going to look like a 1970s science fiction movie attempting to envision 100 years later, and then you look back 10 years and that looks silly. So we're going to have a hard time predicting where we're going to go. I think we're already seeing that in the evidence. So I don't think COVID-19 has been a green reset, actually, because for the reasons that were just mentioned, China's having to create energy for its purposes, and it doesn't have the coal it needs. And you had the geopolitics with Australia. I find it interesting that Australia, the UK, and the US have decided to partner together. When Australia might be the country, certainly the Western country doing the least on climate change, and somehow they're our friend. Okay. So there's a lot of interesting, weird dynamics going on, and that will continue, would be my prediction, and that there'll be more surprises to come, and it'll shock the system, and we'll have to adapt, and we'll have to consider jobs and people, and innovation will surprise people. Things will develop, and they will transform industries. We're in the age of sector transformation. Economists and investors largely didn't predict that the U.S. technology firms will take over the larger economy. And is that okay? I think it's been very interesting to see China's response to the rise of the importance of data and technology. And I think it's hard to argue with the fact that if you want to let technology companies just run things, well, you're going to get some interesting results. Again, not predicted by economists. So I think we're in the age of surprises and change, and we're not very good at predicting change or risk, for that matter.
Well, that's what we've built is capital success on trying to understand these long-term trends in terms of convergence, and that's very interesting. And that's where I would like to discuss a bit now. It's like as investors, what should we expect, and what should our clients expect? And when I'm asking you about that, I would also like to hear what you have to share in terms of what's going on in the US. Maybe you can start with you, Cary, and in China in terms of climate finance, because as Changhua was mentioning in the beginning, this transition is going to be very expensive and needs to be financed. So can you share with us a little bit, again, ahead of COP26, are you excited about what's going on in terms of climate finance?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I mentioned those 5 pillars of what we need to see happen: corporate, investor, policy, consumer, innovation, we're doing a lot on innovation. We need more. We're definitely doing more on investment, and that's an exciting change, really, for the first time in 2021. I would say literally every single financial institution now needs to have a team or grow a team on climate finance, green finance, sustainable finance. Firms are looking globally for opportunities. I think that's very exciting, and the interest in the field is at an all-time level. When you look at reports about flows of assets, more and more money is going into sustainable funds across asset class. Private equity is getting involved, venture capital is getting involved. So the whole food chain of the creation of companies maturing, becoming large enough tickets for private equity to write. Every company has to respond in some way. Every investor is responding. Much more is needed, but we're starting really for the first time to see everyone on board. Millennials will inherit trillions of dollars. Young people increasingly care. There's agitation for change on the inside of organizations. So these are all good trends. Things are heading in a better direction here in the US on climate finance.
Well, it's good to hear, especially now that you have a new administration in place. What about China, Changhua?
Sure. Let me just take one step, actually. I really like what the Nobel Prize winner said in the physics side, and the professor, I think, Kyoruku Manabe. One thing he said is sort of fascinating, also connect to the topic we were, the earlier topic there. I think from a scientist's perspective, and he felt actually it's very easy to do the modeling, right? So of course, and his achievement has been recognized by Nobel Prize, but from his personal experience, the way he looks at the climate change, he feels modeling is easy, right? From science perspective and particularly the climate modeling part. And so he feels it's easy. But from the economics perspective, the way he looks at it is at least 1,000 times more difficult, right? It's complicated. I totally agree with Cary's point. This is exactly where the challenge exists today. But also, of course, when there's a crisis, we need to figure out, the solutions there. I think that's going to be a major sort of effort, probably, hopefully, from the economics perspective. Economists' perspective, somehow more work will be dedicated to making progress there. The reason I mentioned that, because it's related to better finance, right? And so to answer your question, climate finance is no brainer because, with all the policies, with the globally Paris Agreement at the national level, we've all been taking on those, carbon, we call like, in China, we call like a dual carbon sort of goals there. Of course, all regulations, whatever, moving towards that direction, and the money follows, right? So climate finance continue to increase, whatever, there's no problem. I don't think anyone would challenge that. The deeper issue will be because of finance cares about two things, right? Risk and return, right? So from risk perspective, again, it's no brainer at all. With all the things happening around financial institutions or investors there, you have to change, right? One side you follow the policy directions there, you follow technology innovations there, you follow where the infrastructure project will be. And also the social part there as well. I think the issue actually probably more and more focused on the return. I don't think that has been addressed. So because of the complexity of the issues, and also because of the constantly shifting situation, right? This is a pivotal moment. I think that's going to be a major issue, still the biggest issue probably on the table in terms of scale, right? It's not like, climate finance, you just put the money in there. If you don't make money, doesn't make any sense. So that's one there to look at. From China perspective, again, of course, China is a part of the global trend and also a major catalyst for climate, we're collecting more and more green financing in China. So what has been happening in China, of course, it started with the financial sector, right? Financial regulatory, banking regulatory committee. If you look at People's Bank of China, if you look at all the regulations there, and pretty much, every document, whatever, there's green finance there. From action perspective, I think this probably going back to about a decade ago, because we've had, it's not brand new actually. So we've had equitable principles. So this sort of a sustainable finance or green finance has been there, right? It's been pushed forward, the financial institution banks are all in there. So from that perspective, so Chinese banking, or financial institutions have been moving forward, right? Getting down to in terms of what the metrics, and they also have to report. It's not like just regulations, right? They have to reporting or what metrics there, what are the regulations there, what are the benchmarks there, and what the performance there as well. So that's the first thing China definitely has been moving. The second element is around the green bond. So because this is where we will be, we are where we're going to be. So China definitely has been moving forward very aggressively on green bond, moving very fast. I think if the total amount actually probably only next to Germany. So definitely we are, besides green bond, if you started to see sustainable bond loans, sustainable equity, whatever, everything is green, right? There's financial there. From Chinese capital to the sort of overseas perspective, I think the Belt and Road Initiative is definitely the vehicle. Carrying this sort of agenda there. If you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, when it was first started back in the early 2010s, in 2013, the design actually was not for green, right? So there are different design agendas there, but very quickly, just within the particular last 5 years or so, now it's totally green. And the latest announcement by the Chinese president actually at the UN General Assembly this year, the video conference, he announced China basically stop, we're going to stop, build any coal-fired power plant projects overseas there. That's a very important signal. In the meantime, actually, so it's not China going to stop invest overseas. Instead, actually, China will be redirecting its capital financial capability to supporting developing countries develop a green and carbon energies there. And then at the ESG, I think ESG, should be brought into the context there, because it's one side is an indicator, it's a reflection, it's an indicator, right? And there's a lot of stories last year, the success, right? And the funds, ESG funds, whatever. China is not really lagging far behind. China definitely sees it, senses it there as well. So you started to see China moving towards the same direction. In the meantime, there's the other angle, which is also fascinating to see, is disclosure, ESG disclosure. Even though China still doesn't have very well developed regulations, at the national level, regulating the sector in terms of what you report, how you report it, China quickly, just jumping on board, following others, right? So we started to see companies actually not only banking, financial institutions there, but throughout all different industries also being sort of jumping on board to disclose, even though from in terms of granularity and system, whatever policy, China is lagging behind, but somehow it's moving forward. So climate finance in a nutshell, it's not simply say, oh, climate finance, this carbon issue, of course, need to be in there in everywhere, but somehow it's already sort of being mainstreamed in many, many ways. There's no other option. That's the only option. The only problem is, in this transitional period, so it's not like we get there tomorrow, right? We said that we're going to do, we get there tomorrow. This transition period, you see the confusion, right? Because the different driving forces, elements are pulling the strings. I think this is where the challenge today, I call it transition challenge.
Okay, thank you so much, Changhua. I think the world is in general not aware enough of what's happening in China in terms of climate finance. So I thought it was really interesting to hear your perspectives on that. Look, time is up. So I had many other questions, but of course I knew that we wouldn't have the time to take them because we also wanted to go to go in, quite deep on some of these questions we talked about today. It's clearly very complex. You remember that I told you initially that I would have loved us to be able to finish this interesting webinar, but I would have asked you, thumb up or down regarding COP26 being a success and failure. And first of all, I'm a stubborn optimist. I've read The Future We Choose. I think we need to have stubborn optimism. And initially, at the beginning, you told me that you were not maybe that optimist. So anyway, the point is, it's of course clearly not that easy to say thumb up and down, but COP26 is on us. We will be discussing the main outcome and how you've been perceiving the different announcements, the different commitments that will be made during this very important a couple of weeks in Glasgow in November. Right now, we're targeting the date of the 19th of November. And on this note, I would really like to say, well, thank you, Cary and Changhua, on participating and contributing with very interesting insights. Thank you to all of our clients and friends listening in. And if, of course, they have any specific questions, since there would be a part 2 to this event, please let us know, and we'll be able to address these questions with Cary and Changhua in November. So, Cary, Changhua, once again, thanks a lot, and see you soon after COP26.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.